Just a tap. You guys should all take a turn.
Hello, everyone.
Good.
How about you?
Oh, we'll take that one. They have more. I don't think I'm going to need all of this.
You're all set. City Hall. Oh, that's on the dais. All right, buddy. Good. Good evening and welcome to the City Council Workshop Session for August 25th, 2025. This meeting will be, open the meeting at 5:03. Have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Martinez?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Here.
Councilmember Voigt?
Here.
Oh, this is an old.
You threw me off.
Sorry, this is old. I'm sorry. Let me run that back.
Okay.
Councilmember Fenn?
Here.
Councilmember Martinez?
Here.
Councilmember White?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Voigt?
Here.
Mayor Lara?
Here. So any action requests for excused absences? No. Will you all stand, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready? Begin. No conflict of interest or disclosures that I'm aware of. Public comment period. Any one person may address City Council on any matter on this agenda. If you wish to speak, please fill out a public comment form provided at the back table and give it to the city clerk. There is a 3-minute time limit on public comments. There will be no sharing or passing of time to another person. State law prohibits the City Council from discussing and taking actions brought up by your comments. Nicole, do we have any public comments this evening?
I have no written requests. Benny, do we have any callers on the line?
No callers.
Okay, so that brings us to action item C, future police station conceptual design and funding direction. City staff is requesting approval of the conceptual design, direction on funding paths for the future police station. Chief Ramos.
Thank you, Mayor. Before I turn it over to the chief and Robert and our consultants that have joined us tonight, what I'd like to do is there's a series of PowerPoints in your packets, and so what we would like to do is go through those PowerPoints and then at the end of each one, take questions because they're all tied to the police station, but one's the conceptual, the other is the funding, and so we'd like to take breaks and answer questions once we get through all of the, or each individual PowerPoint, if that works.
Good with that?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Chief?
Good evening. Before I begin my part of the presentation, I'd like to introduce Jeremy Hart, who's our architect from LPA, who can go over the first few slides on a cost breakdown and the initial information before we go into what we're trying to accomplish in our design concept.
Nicole, we only have the staff report.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, Elizabeth, the loaded PDF was only the agenda itself, not, I'm sorry, just the outline? Yeah.
Yeah.
I just go online.
Do it that way.
We're stuck here.
Well, I was going to, but then I might.
The other PDF that's on there is from the finance and audit.
I don't need to, I'll just.
It was only, yeah, I don't know what happened there, but the only thing we got was.
Has there been any changes to the PowerPoint that you're aware of? Okay, that'll be good. Thank you. We're too fast.
Jessica, you guys good down there? Yeah, it went to some weird page with Edge and couldn't get off of it. Thank you, and then.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you very much for having me here. Once again, my name is Jeremy Hart. I'm an architect with LPA, and it's been my pleasure to work with the city and the police department over the last several years, conceptually designing, theorizing what this new police station might look like. So we're here tonight to share with you the progress on the design, what we would anticipate the project to cost, and what the layout of the station is and what it might look like. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to start with the conceptual cost estimate. And as we think about what does this project cost, we always like to clarify the assumptions that we've made, because the assumptions that we make in the total project cost can have a very large bearing on how we anticipate the costs. And so the first assumption we made was it was going to take 20 months to build. We think that that's a appropriate, if not conservative, timeframe to think about the duration of construction. We have anticipated this is a traditional design build delivery method. The site that we were given was 9 acres. We are only saying that we need to develop 4.5. So our costs do not encompass developing the entire site, only 4.5 acres of the site. We've made the assumption, because we don't have surveys, that all utilities are coming from Beaumont Avenue. And that you'll also see, as we look at the costs, there are some solar canopies to protect the fleet of vehicles. And those solar canopies come with some battery backup. Go to the next slide. We have a very detailed project estimate that makes a series of assumptions. If you'll go to the next slide, the one that I want to highlight for you is project escalation. So we are pricing the project in today's dollars because we know what today's dollars are. But we know that we can't start construction today, so we want to anticipate what will this cost when we go to construction. So that means we have to assume a project development and design and construction schedule. So for the sake of this estimate, we've assumed a midpoint of construction in January of 2028. That's the date that our dollars are based upon, which means we would anticipate starting construction in March of 2027, which means your project is likely bidding in January of 2027 in anticipation of going to construction. And that, again, is if you're in a traditional design, bid, build, delivery method. So what does that cost in future dollars? That's that 15.93% markup in the total project cost. That's escalation, so that's really important. If you have a way to accelerate the schedule, there's dollars savings because you can bring down that anticipated escalation. If the project delays, then we would anticipate that escalation number going up and the project costing more. Go to the next slide. Here we have a detailed breakdown. As we look through the design, you'll see there is an anticipated new police department building. There's a separate building that encompasses evidence and training, another building for animal control, and then there's the site work. As we look at the design, you'll see that we have made multiple buildings on the campus, not because, the reason for making multiple buildings, if I state it a little differently, a police department is an essential service facility. By the state of California, that means we have to build it to a higher seismic safety risk factor. In the event of an earthquake, a natural disaster, or power outage, we want the building to be operational because there's first responders operating out of that building. And so a way to help manage and mitigate cost is we only put the essential functions, the essential services in the main headquarters building. It has a higher construction cost because it has all those extra costs. Animal control, evidence, we can put those in a separate outbuilding, and we can build it at a traditional seismic risk factor, and it costs less money. So that's why we've separated the buildings into multiple buildings. But you'll see here, there's a total anticipated construction cost of $67.9 million. And again, that's if you start construction in March of the year 2027. We go to the next slide. Our cost estimate is not a pie-in-the-sky estimate. We have met with our estimator, done very detailed cost breakouts based upon takeoffs of the floor plans, anticipated materials, and anticipated design. This is just a summary of the detail of that, but I do want to draw your attention to line item 48 at the bottom of the page, $4.625 million. That's the anticipated cost of the solar power and the battery backup system that we've included in the design. We did some rough calcs. We anticipate that to cover 90% of the energy costs of the entire building. There is a factor in there, plus or minus 10%. It is conceivable as we sort of sharpen the pencils on design, because we are very early, that the police station could be a zero net energy building, meaning with this $4.6 million in electric power generation, you would be covering all the cost of your electricity as long as you operate the building. I also highlight this because I know that $67.9 million is not a small number. And so as we start to think about areas to save money, this is really the lowest hanging fruit. The building codes in California are changing every 3 years. We have a new code cycle going into effect in January that will say that a small portion of our building must have solar panels and battery backup, but it's a considerably less number. Like if we're covering 90%, it's more like 10% is what the code minimum is requiring. So that number could come down significantly should you so desire. If you go to the next slide. So as we look at that total cost of construction, we are also including the general conditions. That's what a contractor would charge to build it. That covers what's going on site. Then we've included a percentage for overhead and profit. Again, that's what a general contractor who builds this is going to charge. They're going to be bonded and insured. That's another dollar number that comes into that. And then we've included design contingency at 10%. We are very early in the design process. If you think of the whole design process from the program where we sit down with the chief and we talk about what needs to be in this building, and we look at the very end when we have a building permit in hand, we're ready to give it to the general contractor. If giving the permit to the general contractor is 100%, we're at about 3%. So we have a long way to go. We've made a lot of assumptions, and that design contingency is meant to cover those design assumptions that maybe we haven't thought of, we haven't effectively communicated to our cost estimate. So as we progress through the design phase, you would see that design contingency number coming down as we get closer and closer to final completion. But that's why we've included that number. And then you see the cost of that escalation number, that 15.93%. That's $9.3 million of the total project cost is what we anticipate it to cost in future dollars. So that's how we get to the $67.9 million construction cost. So now we'll go through the space plan.
Do you want to, council, do you have any questions for Jeremy?
I do. So you refer to it as a design contingency, but the 10% is based on the whole project, right? Not just the design, it's not just a contingency for your design estimate, correct?
It's, the design contingency is a contingency on the design of the whole project. We always recommend that, separate from this number, that an owner carries an owner's contingency that would cover unforeseen things. My favorite example is we were doing a project at JPL. They started digging the foundations and they hit a pocket of creosote. Turns out that the kids at Caltech used to go blow stuff up and then bury it in the dirt. Nobody knew that there was something buried in the dirt when we started construction there. So that came out of an owner's contingency because we had to remediate a hazardous thing. So as you start to dig on the site, there might be unforeseen things that you don't know about. There's something that comes up. So that would be an owner's contingency. This is design contingency, really focused on mitigating design creep, design changes, things that we haven't anticipated. We want to allow some room for the design to evolve.
But how much was the design estimate?
If we go back. I'm sorry, sir, I'm not quite sure I understand.
The design contingency is just the contingency value, right? Or is
Yes.
that the design plus the contingency?
So we put a 10% design contingency, so by the time we have overhead and profit, general conditions, bonds, and insurance, the project cost is $53 million. So 10% of that, $5.3 million, is the dollar figure added to the project cost for design contingency.
Okay. It's sort of unusual as far as the way I remember seeing these kinds of estimates, which is there's a construction contingency, there's not a construction contingency here. Is that just the design contingency covers construction and design? Or is that what you're talking about when you mention the owner?
I would more think of an construction contingency as an owner's contingency,
Okay, and who would be the owner? That, if we're going,
the city.
okay. So why is that in here?
Our project cost estimate identifies the hard cost of construction, what you would anticipate, the $67.9 million is what you would anticipate paying a general contractor to build the building.
Okay, I'm just confused because you're calling it a design contingency of 5 million, and I think the design was about 5 million, and that's not 10% of the contingency.
It's not, the design contingency is not a contingency on the design cost to design it.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
We don't know what the end product will be, so there has to be some padding of the number to accommodate what the end product will be for estimating.
I guess where I'm confused with your answer was if there is a design contingency and then there's another contingency based on the owner and the city is the owner, why aren't we considering that in this process?
I think the term should be cost contingency, and I see why you're saying it's a little confusing just to say design.
So, but what I think what you're telling us is on top of that 5, you're not, I think you said you're not including an owner contingency in here,
So,
whatever you want to call it.
yes, this is the construction cost.
Okay.
A total project cost would be more than the $67.9 million. That would include the fees you would pay to an architect, the permitting fees, if you have school district fees, furniture, fixtures, and equipment that go in the building. Those would be what we call the difference between hard and soft cost. Hard is the construction cost, Soft costs are all those other things that would get you to a total project cost. And an owner's contingency would be a part of those soft costs.
So this 73 million, you have it labeled here as total estimated construction cost and design fee, but that's not the total project cost?
No, there would be additional,
How much?
we have not estimated that at this point.
Okay. How do we make a decision not knowing whether that's going to be 1 million or 10 million?
Sorry. Councilmember, I think we're going to touch on that with the next presentation
Okay.
about how to manage some of the risk. I think what your architect had referenced early in his presentation was the delivery method being design build. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I think that will help kind of put some bookends a little bit on it. And in
Okay.
our assumption, just to give the council a look ahead, we assume 75 million. But keep in mind, the reason why we're using 75 million is you've already allocated 8 million for design and acquisition of property. So it's 75 plus the 8 is the assumption we're using in our presentation.
Okay. So the total project cost is going to include the money that we've already,
Yeah, I think we used 83 million
okay.
is our estimate. So we'll go through that when we go through.
Okay.
In addition, just to clarify, the handout that I provided does provide some of those additional costs. And we have estimated this project to have a total estimated cost of 88.5 million.
That's including the 8 million that we've already, or is
Yeah.
or is it 80?
It's
Is
not-
it
it's
88
not-
plus 8 million?
No, it's
Okay.
total.
Total cost, okay.
And that includes our construction contingency as well as the design contingency, because they're not one and the same, are they? 'Cause that's what you're saying,
It
right?
has considerable contingency in there.
Okay. Councilmember Martinez?
Yeah, just a quick question. For the power, power generation, is there any requirement for a PD to have a backup system? And is that what this is a part of, or is this more for cost for electricity use?
So there is a requirement for a police department to have an emergency power backup. Part of that Essential Service Seismic Safety Act says that we have to have an emergency generator to offset all the first responders' needs for 72 hours. So the project cost includes an emergency generator and a fuel tank to let the PD run for 72 hours. The solar panels and the battery backup are on top of that. The current codes don't recognize an offset of a battery backup. We see those codes evolving and changing, but in the new code cycle, we don't anticipate them allowing us to offset a PV system and battery backup in lieu of a diesel generator yet. But we do think that's coming at some
Right,
point.
so this 4.6 then does not include that emergency backup?
That emergency generators is in the cost estimate, but not a part of that 4.6.
Okay, and last question that deals with that. Is there somewhere along the line that we get an electricity consumption estimate to kind of, well, I guess further as we get it, closer so that we can see whether that's going to be something that, we want to entertain?
Yes, so we've made some assumptions based upon prior police departments we've designed about how much we would anticipate the building, how much electricity we'd anticipate the building to use. And we've used a standard, kilowatt production rate of the system to understand how much the building is using and how much the system is generating. And then ultimately, as we refine the design, we can sharpen the pencil on those numbers and get closer to, if you want it to be 80%, 100%, or 10%, we can size it pretty much exactly what you look for.
And you'll have those numbers later as we get closer to?
As you would get a more
to the
complete
design.
design, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
You're using or identifying masonry as the way to construct the building. I'm assuming that's to meet the seismic requirements for the administrative building. Are there other methods that can be used that may be more cost-effective to meet the same criteria?
For a police department, the two most cost-effective methods would be a concrete block, as we've shown, or a concrete tilt-up wall like you'd see on a warehouse building.
Right.
Those are both very effective on a police department because they're a hardened exterior building skin that
Right.
provides a level of protection and safety. The engineering of meeting the seismic factors is achievable in a lot of different construction types, but CMU and tilt-up walls are the most cost-effective. Sometimes it depends on when you're bidding it and who's bidding it as to which one's cheaper. They're both very competitive.
From what I've seen, though, too, tilt-ups can tend to be a quicker form of construction and may save us time in the long run, or is that not necessarily true?
I wouldn't necessarily think it's true. It would be a great question to leg out with a contractor as we talk through this. But from our experience, the time frame on delivering one or the other is relatively similar. It's a one-story building, and so block can go pretty quickly. The tilt-up walls are very quick and cost-effective when we get into 2 stories.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, okay, thank you.
Mayor, Council, I'm going to show you a few slides, beginning with a general overall aerial design of the station. We're going to go through a floor plan design, the flow, and then a conceptual walk around of the building. Before I do, I just wanted to explain that we built this station with a goal of having it be a home for our police department for the next 30, potentially 50 years. We looked at the diff study, growth potential, and the 97,000 population that's projected. It's approximately 52% population increase from where we are today. So this design is based on a 52% increase of our police staffing. So currently we are at 62 police officers and 92 employees. This design is for about 95 to 100 officers and 130 to 140 employees. So we are doing our best to project where we'll be in the future without me reading the tarot cards right. I'm just basing it on the best information I have, and then the station design needs using cities of similar size to design what we need moving forward. So a lot of this took a lot of research, a lot of agencies in California and nearby states of similar size, and what they bring and what they have and what they want in their stations, and we incorporated into this. So I'm going to show you a quick overview of the police department. Off of Beaumont Avenue, you'll see 2 driveways. We have a visitor parking, and one of the top driveway will split off to employee parking through the north gate, and another driveway on the south side, which is 100% for employees only. The station will be surrounded on the back side. That secure parking lot will access the patrol cars, employee parking, our evidence and training building, and in the top left corner, you'll see the animal control building. The reason why we moved the animal control building separately is we don't know our animal control needs moving forward. So we want to make it in the back area of the police department, so if there's growth necessary, we have the area to expand. We didn't want to put them in the building, and now we're trying to expand a building we just spent a lot of money on. This is the general layout and flow of the department. Can you see where I'm moving the mouse? Oh, perfect. I will start with the heart of this building, and that is the public lobby. The public lobby, you'll see, has the restrooms for the public, an option we do not offer currently for our public. So the public will have restrooms. To the right, we have a community room. This is a room we can house our citizen academies, any public presentation. It can accommodate 50 people with some side rooms to, one's gonna be a small kitchen to keep food warm so we can cater, and others is storage for extra tables, presentation equipment. But the reason why we have this out front is a police department needs to be secure. There is confidential information inside the building through the Department of Justice data, criminal investigations. We want to avoid just having the public wander our stations during the events. Although we love our public, there are things they shouldn't be seeing, and it's difficult now because we always have to make sure things are covered before we walk people in the station to our current conference room. So the public will have access to everything we often provide without being into the secure area of the facility. If you work your way down past the lobby, this whole center of the building, the walls are going to be mostly glass. And the reason why, I'll show you in a minute, is the roof on the center of the building is elevated to bring in natural light through the windows, through the center of the building. So the sides of the station will have natural light, and the center of the building, the heart of the building, will have natural light. So now we enter the station and you see a conference room. The reason why we put the conference room here in the middle is when we have outside agencies come visit, or we do need to bring people in from the lobby for a more confidential conversation. They're in our station, in the secure area, but not wandering around the station. They're just a few feet from the lobby where it's still an area that we can control. Continuing further down the design, we have where our supervisors will sit. The supervisors will have their own cubicles, and in the corner there is a counseling room. So if a supervisor needs to talk to an employee in private, they have a private room for that function, but we didn't see a need to give every single supervisor their own office space. We were trying to use the square footage we have as efficient as possible. And then continuing further down, we have our communications center. Our current police department has 4 dispatch stations. This is 8. This is the anticipation of our city growth and keeping up with the pace of call volume that our police department receives. So the station design is really focused on anyone in the station doesn't have to go far to access communications or a supervisor. They'll be found in the heart of the organization. If we work our way to the right, you'll see this giant room with a bunch of chairs. That will be the briefing room, which will also be doubled as a training room that we can host classes, conduct in-house training. On this side, we also have restrooms. And you can continue further down this hallway coming down. We have server rooms, IT workspace, and a break room. And along this bottom wall right here is going to be all glass because our break room will have a nice view that looks over Noble Creek Park. Beautiful view on a clear day. You can see the Badlands. And our dispatch center will have that beautiful view. And the reason why we want to make sure our dispatchers have that view is they are the only people in our department that can never leave their workstations for very long. They're stuck at their workplace. They deserve a good view. The rest of us, we have the ability to leave the station. We can go handle calls, go out in the field. They're stuck there. We want to make sure they have the best view of the department. If we continue to the right, this is going to be the investigation side of the building. We have office spaces for interviews, office spaces for investigative supervisors, an investigative briefing room in the bottom left corner. And this is where you often see on TV where they have all the pictures of suspects on the wall, confidential information, which is secure and only available to those investigators. And we also have some unassigned workspace offices for future growth. As our department grows, we anticipate investigative units growing also. And then we also have enough cubicles for what we anticipate build out to be for investigations and special assignments to work. And if you go above that, this will be the administrative side of the building where the chief of police, the captains, the management analysts will be working out of. If we continue across to the other side of the building, now we get to the patrol side over here. We have storage rooms. We have a report writing room that we put close to the doors to the left. And the reason why we did that is if there's an emergency call, they're close to the exits, they can rush out of the building, get in their cars and respond to the calls. So we wanted them to have easy access to their vehicles when they're on duty. Next to the report writing area is also their evidence booking area, which have pass-through lockers to a secure area where property and evidence will collect that that property and move it to the property evidence building. I'll show you in a moment. Above that, we have records, our record supervision and management, and our in-custody housing area where we put arrestees. We're not a jail facility, but we often bring people into our facility to complete the paperwork necessary before we book them in jail, to conduct in-custody interviews. So this is an area we can do it in a secure location. Next to it, you'll see the Sally Port. What a Sally Port is a secure garage we can pull a police car into, close the doors, and then take the suspect out. So if the suspect tries to run, he's secure. And this one is designed to fit 3 cars. Right now, we do not have a Sally Port, but we anticipate, I hope we're not arresting more than 3 carfuls of people at a time. We're not there yet, hope we never are, but we will fit 3 cars. Now we continue down. Where'd it go? We'll continue down to the gray area, and this is going to be our locker room, fitness area, and training area. You'll see that the locker room is open. There is no men and women's locker room in this concept. It is when I first found out about this, I had resistance to the idea, and I think it's very natural. We're used to seeing a men's locker room and a women's locker room. The problem is cities are getting sued because if someone doesn't identify as male or female, we need to accommodate them with their own locker room. Right now, the state recognizes 3 sex options, so we can build 3 locker rooms, or are we going to project that the state may accept additional sex identities in the future? If we continue down that path, we're adding to the cost of building more square footage, more lockers, because we don't know how many employees of each category we're going to have 30, 40, 50 years out. So the safest option, and it's recommended by LPA and numerous other companies that I've spoken to, is an open concept where everyone is in the same room, everyone is treated equal, which is why you see those 14 rooms on each side. They are changing rooms and bathrooms. Each employee will grab their locker or their uniforms from their locker, go in a private changing room where they're by themselves. So now they have more privacy provided to them than they do in a regular men and women's locker area, and they can change in private and then return to the locker, put on their gear, and go to work. This is a concept that's been very popular in other states, including one of the stations we toured yesterday. And I know the Austin Police Department is moving all their stations to this design concept. It's just the way of the future because there's less liability when you provide everyone equal amount of privacy. And it's a safe option. It's an option that I recommend at this point in time. The second building that you saw in the original concept was the property and evidence and training range. On the left side of this building is where all the property and evidence will be stored long-term, with some workspace for our property and evidence technicians and a small public lobby for when people come to pick up their property. They don't have to go to the station and then wait. They can come directly to the property and evidence side and get it directly from them. It's just a way to provide faster service to our community. We also have some storage rooms along that building, including a vehicle inspection bay for any vehicles held for evidence that could be inspected out of the elements. Storage for motorcycle equipment, our patrol bicycles, and there are a few kennels in this design, and training rooms. And you'll see on the bottom right is the firing range that is included in this building. Do you want to talk about this? Okay.
So our concept design, we've laid out a floor plan that is very functional from an operations standpoint. And so then, while we've looked at it from the inside out, now we're going to start to look at it from the outside in. How do we make sense architecturally? How do we make the building forms start to relate to each other? And so what we started to naturally see in the layout are these 3 distinct bars. The east and west bar that had a lot of functional components to it, and then that center bar, as the chief referred to, is the heart of the building, where all that that great sort of connection and everything occurs. And so, if you go to the next slide, we can start to see a 3D perspective of the floor plan projected on the site. If you go to the next slide, we can see how we might extrude those two forms. As I said, this is a one-story building. So with the building parapets, we're anticipating 15-foot high on the east and west ends, but then that center bay being higher, as it was stated earlier, because we want to bring natural light into the center of the building. If you go to the next slide, we start to think about how we might set the roof up, pitch it so it's facing the west, so we can set it up for optimal solar orientation for photovoltaic panels, and then also carve out a space where we can hide all the mechanical equipment that's very centrally located, efficiently feeding all portions of the building. So you're seeing that sort of notch in the middle where we can hide the mechanical equipment. If we go to the next slide, we start to incorporate, you'll see the blue sections where we're putting in windows. So this is the front elevation where that community room and lobby is. So we want that to be open and inviting and let people see what's going on inside the lobby and the community room. Moving to the next slide, here you start to see we're starting to represent materiality. So the masonry block walls on the perimeter, a steel structure that starts to extend out from the building, creating overhangs, protecting us from the sun, both on all different elevations. Standing seam metal roof. If you go to the next slide, we start to overlay what the landscape might start to look like. From here, we're going to sort of, as a bird might be, flying around the building, just some perspectives. You're seeing, again, all those parking canopies with solar panels protecting the vehicles, keeping out of the hot sun. The next one, we drop down to eye level. So here you're starting to see, this is what you might see of the building as you approach the site from Beaumont Avenue. You've just turned into the entry drive. One of the things we think about in police station design, if someone's in distress, you want them to immediately know, if I go to the police station, how do I find the front door and get help? So it's very intentional. We extend that overhang out. I hope nobody looks at this and questions where the front door is. We've got the flags right up front. That larger mast, if you remember, the chief referred to the Sally Port. That's that mast kind of right in the front that you would see. So that's a great place to put the flagpoles and anchor everybody as they enter the site. Looking at the next slide, we've just come in and you're headed towards that public parking up front. And then this view is a closer up detailed view of that main entry. So we've got a great opportunity to sign the building. You're seeing that canopy extend out, and then, like I talked about earlier, that glass that brings you into the main lobby and that community meeting room. We started to think about different ways of branding the building. Should it be in blue, Beaumont blue, or should it be something that is more natural, wants to feel like wood? We're very early in the design process. If it's a concrete block wall, tilt-up wall, if it's blue, if it's natural, we have lots of time to leg this out and find out what the appropriate approach to the design is. But as we were just looking at this, the question came up, what would it look like if it was blue? So we've provided that for you. Again, as the chief referred to, we're just going to kind of quickly walk around the building. And if there's anything you want to add, Chief, please go ahead. View from the main entry. Stepping back again. Rather than showing a bunch of bollards, steel bollards that you might find to protect the building, we've tried to take it and let it feel more inviting, more naturalistic. So you're starting to see huge stone boulders that can protect the building from someone that might drive a vehicle. So you'll see those strategically placed. And then we've even thought about just outside the community room is a place for a fallen officer memorial. So that might be something that we include in a little courtyard right off the main entry. That's what that dark gray plinth is meant to represent in this view. Here's a view kind of looking, you see the roll-up door that brings you into the Sally Port for when you bring someone in from custody, and then you're seeing two doors, vehicle access gates to bring you back into the secure parking lot. This is a view from inside the secure parking lot. You see on the left-hand side, that's the exit door from the Sally Port. And then here you're seeing the two roll-up doors that would lead you into the fitness area around the locker room. So when we've got great weather, open up those roll-up doors, let the officers enjoy the fresh air, and their training can spill out into a patio space just outside that. This is that covered sort of outdoor courtyard. The windows that you see in the building look into the break room and into the dispatch area. So we felt it was really important to bring natural daylight to the dispatch. The folks that sit at those desks all day hardly ever get a break. And so sometimes we've seen facilities where they don't have any windows and they don't know if it's day or night. They've been staring at the computer so long. So it's really important to their health and well-being, access to natural daylight. We think that this does a great job of doing that. Here's a close-up view. You can start to see different types of patio furniture out there, let people come out and enjoy the weather on a really great day. Here's a view of the other side of the building. So we've got the investigations down in this wing, so lots of windows into the space, bringing natural daylight in for the people working in that environment. Close access to parking should they need it, and then back to sort of an aerial perspective from the secure side of the parking lot looking at the building.
That's the conclusion of the presentation. Is there any questions on the design specifically?
Before that, is there a way I can interject and kind of show the site plan on Google Earth and then the inclusion of Mountain Avenue, the road, Mountain View? IT can share my screen. So I took LPA's site plan and overlaid it in Google Earth just to give a graphical feel of where it occurs. In addition, I overlaid a very high-level conceptual alignment for Mountain Avenue. Along the back, it does connect for cost estimating purposes. It does connect to Cougar, and then also all the way south to Oak Valley Parkway. It is a local road having a right-of-way of 60 feet and a paved width of 40 feet. And then also a access to the back of the PD station. The location of that at this time is just like a placeholder. Moving it any north or south doesn't really impact the cost significantly. The cost to construct this complete local road with sidewalk, curb, gutter is approximately $3.5 million. That includes the access road and all the amenities of a typical local road. There are two properties that this road will require right-of-way to the south of the PD station. It's roughly 0.8 acres from each of those parcels. And then the road will entirely be built on the city's 30 acres and then also those two southerly parcels. There is currently a subdivision. I think it's the Noble Creek. Gus, can you confirm that?
It's the new proposal to replace the old Noble Creek specific plan that was repealed. So that's in process and review. DRC has taken a look at it, and it aligns with what we have here.
So because that project is so far along, the road had to be considered on our property and then the two properties to the south to not impact the development of the westerly parcel. All right, so that concludes my addition.
Thank you, Robert. Councilmember Finn?
Yes, thank you. So there was mention of that the public could go to the evidence building. How would they enter the area? Because it looked like it was gated off.
Can I share my screen? You'll see if you come in from Beaumont Avenue, instead of turning left into the main lobby, if you turn right, we have that support parking area. And that gives you direct access to the evidence building.
So that little sidewalk that's above the word support, is that a sidewalk above the word support? Would they go
Yes.
into the building with a door there?
Correct.
Okay, all right. And then, would we need any road modifications to Beaumont Avenue for any turn lanes into the police station or anything like that?
No. There's the, I forget the name of the trees. What are the trees? The deodar trees that would be impacted if we did try to propose that. Our TIA analysis didn't warrant a dedicated left turn lane.
Okay. And so that, well, obviously then the driveways are in between the existing trees, correct?
Yeah, it'll take some planning to ensure that they do fall in between, so it may shift slightly from what's shown.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Martinez?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up on that, we would have the ability as a city to mark those in case, kind of similar to the fire where this, don't block this area. It does back up sometimes there. I'm assuming that's still within our privilege to do that, right? Okay. So the design, we said that it was a 4.5 acres, but we had 9 allotted. So is the footprint 4.5 or is that green area 4.5? When I'm looking at the design.
The green area is the 9 acres. 4.5 is what is being
The
developed.
footprint, okay. And just a quick thing on the glass makes me nervous. It looks nice and I agree. So just from your point of view and I guess your input, not so much, I'm worried more of the one facing towards the field because of the high end and BB guns and stuff being shot through there. Not a concern. I think you feel comfortable having the glass pointing in that direction.
It's a valid concern, but we have glass in the front of our station now and have not had issues. So is there a chance of a rare occurrence? Yes. We just have not experienced it. And I think the importance of having the glass is just to give our employees a more welcoming working environment and just seeing sunlight's healthier for their
Yeah,
well-being.
no, I agree. I just, bring in the safety factor because, you don't want to trade one for another, if you can help it. And on the safety note, on your design, it's a beautiful design, and I like the inviting part, and I do like how the rocks add safety and architecture. I just get concerned that the main lobby has no type of barrier. So the main glass and the main lobby and the main where public could be, and the curb looks like it could be jumped very easily. Is that something that you can consider, however that turns out?
Yeah, certainly, we could look at ways of providing pathways and still keeping it feeling very naturalistic and creating those barriers.
It's just the car
Yeah.
thing, because you can see how the parking lot butts right up facing that. And, again, safety is my main concern when it comes to that building and going through it. But I appreciate that. The design is really well thought out. I appreciate the firing range. That was one of my concerns when we talked about the Prior's design way back when. To add that feature is very unique for our area and for our PD, so I appreciate that. And then for the changing rooms, it looks like each changing room has a toilet. And then there's only 2 showers, but I'm assuming that's enough or sufficient for
We
our
just did a
growing.
tour yesterday of a few agencies, and the one that has the open locker room, every bathroom they had also had a shower. And I imagine it's not too much more expensive to add a shower, but something we want to look at.
Okay, that was my only concern, because 2 showers might work now, but if you are looking at a 52% increase, I know we're not all there at the same time, but I'm just saying, just an idea. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Councilmember White?
No, I like the design as well, and I'm going to stay away from the micromanagement of the design. But I did have one question. You had brought up the fact that we would have to complete the road, the mountain road and an access road. Is that all in this budget as well?
It is. So the right-of-way, the acquisition is included in the right-of-way subcategory or subtotal.
Okay.
And then the construction, obviously, is in the construction category.
Okay, and I know this is probably a silly question to some people, but I work at a company that has these big boulders everywhere. They're really expensive. Is that also in the budget, or are we just showing that as design?
It has been priced as a part of our landscape budget.
Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Councilmember Finn?
Yes, quick question back to the road. So should this other project, Noble Creek, come in, would they end up, do you foresee it being a shared road? Would they end up reimbursing the city for their fair share costs of the use of that?
The road is all along our property, but we would have to obtain the right-of-way dedication, not from the Noble Creek folks, but from the property owners next to it. So the discussion for the Noble Creek specific plan, we don't need anything from them because they're outside of that boundary.
Okay,
and they
so-
don't need it for access either.
Okay, all right. I didn't know if it ended up in the future being a shared road, if it was
No.
close enough that they would tie into it or anything like that. Okay, all right, thank you.
So Noble Creek would not, that development would not need that for a secondary point of access?
Correct. The way they've done their design, and if you'd like, I can pass this around. This is a conceptual design for them that's come before DRC. They do have access off of Cougar, but no access off of our property.
Okay. And then the road as proposed is going to be wide enough to use as a public road for ingress and egress, correct?
That is correct. It's representative of any of our town
Perfect.
center roads.
Can you go back to the floor plan, please? One more? Yeah. Perfect. So off the lobby, you have report writing stations, the two yellow squares that are left and right of the lobby, yellow lobby area. Is that where people can be set down to talk to so they don't have to go back any further, or?
Exactly. Right now, we don't have that in our lobby, so people are oftentimes
Good.
expressing private information in front of others.
Right.
This is a way we can talk to them in private
Okay.
without bringing them into the secure area of the department.
Yeah, and I do like the idea of the common locker room. That was something that was a little iffy, but until you see it and you see how it works, it makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
The design, and I know that we're early on, but I would like to include our IT folks to make sure that the room for the equipment is going to be large enough. We've run into that in other buildings when I was, my former life in the county. The other thing too is, two things that occur is, one is concrete cracks and flat roofs leak. And so I'm concerned with flat roofs when I see those. I know, we're early on, but I would like to maybe talk to our maintenance folks to see if there's a better alternative. You have that one bay in the center that's a mechanical bay that's in the central active block. And that looks like it may drain off into to the two roofs or the one roof on either side. And again, flat roofs give me cause for concern. They can tend to be maintenance issues long-term. I do like the raised metal roof, those last forever. Can you go back to the floor plan, please? You know, you really put a lot of thought into this. One of the only dispatch area that we were able to look at yesterday was extremely dark. So I understand what you're saying about wanting to get the natural light in. Used to work in a basement, and so I get the only way you knew what the weather was is when you walked outside for lunch or break. So I do like that concept. I do like the fact that they're in the middle and they're not isolated off by themselves. And then obviously when you purchase furniture for the building, you're only going to purchase furniture for staffing levels that you have, and then as you grow, you'll buy more furniture, correct? We won't fill the whole thing?
Yeah, as we would approach the furniture, a lot of times we will pre-negotiate price for future buys within a certain time frame.
Okay.
With furniture vendors, so you get everything that matches, you get the same product line. And it varies, different furniture vendors offer different time frames, but certainly, it's very common, purchase what you need today and have a plan over the next 10 years to add as you need it.
Okay, thank you. One last thing, on the range, if you go without, not that I don't want our officers to have the most efficient training or effective training possible, but if you go without the ranges, what is the potential cost savings?
Right now, the building of the range is 5.2 million with 1.8 million in equipment, so it'd be a savings of about $7 million.
Have we looked at or thought of, you go online and you can see that there's indoor ranges and there's outdoor ranges. Outdoor ranges, at least as I understand it, can be more cost efficient and would allow tactical training in the elements as opposed to indoors where you're creating the elements, so to speak. And I just, if there's a way to do it outside, still fund it, but have it outside in a different area, obviously you can't have it by the school, and gunshots by the school don't go well, but just because when we talked, I wanted to know, I thought, well, if we can get by with like 2 bays or 3 bays, right? But you want 6 because you want to be able to, and it makes sense, bring cars in to teach officers tactical training and shooting around vehicles. And that just seems like that would really lend itself to the outdoors. And in the outdoors, you maybe even can add buildings or what have you to even do, urban type of tactical training. So I like the idea of a shooting range. I'm not sure if I'm really wild about having it indoors at this point. A cost savings of 1 million or 7 million would be nice. Obviously, we could cover a lot of things. I'm not really sold on full solar, 90% of the project as opposed to maybe a smaller percentage. But the floor plan, obviously, you spent a lot of time on it, and I think it's a great concept. So just looking for ways that we can kind of, peel the onion back and so that we're saving money where we can without the cost of tactical training or training for our officers.
Maybe you bring up a great point. I like the idea of an outdoor range because we work in the elements. It's better to train in the elements. We know it's a significant cost reduction with outdoor range, and I'd love to present you an alternative option in the future on that.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I appreciate you looking at that. That's all I have for right now. Councilmember Finn?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So on the subject of the shooting range, will that accommodate all weapon types?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, even with our rifles, even though they can shoot long range, we often train at 30 yards or less.
With smaller targets, in a sense?
Well, that and most of our situations are usually close distance anyways.
Gotcha.
So we train close distance even with rifles. They're just more accurate, more penetration power, but we don't need a range beyond 30 yards for what we do.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Ready to move on? Okay.
Are you ready for the next?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Mr. Bush? Yeah?
Ready to roll? All right, I think I may have the more difficult part of this presentation tonight, I'm thinking. Yeah, I bet, I can tell. I see a couple faces up there that are very eager. Let me start by saying a few things. This isn't the first time that we've been asked to do this. This is not the first time we've actually worked with LPA, actually, on projects either. So if I'm going to say something out of line or incorrect, I'd like for the gentleman to come up here and correct me, because there might be a few things that might not use the right terms. But generally speaking, I think we're in concert with what's been presented. So a little bit about what we're going to go over today. A little bit about the proposed police station. We spent a little bit of time there, but I know what you're all waiting for. It's the funding plan and delivery strategy. And then we'll talk about this, revenue needs, funding gaps, and risk mitigation that will ultimately bring the project to fruition. So here's our view of a few things that we've kind of noticed in working with city staff. And then obviously tonight, I think it emphasized the need is certainly there. I've been hearing about your police station for 5 or 6 years now. The conversation started with Mr. Parton years ago at a different time with a different cost estimate. We'll go through that in a minute. Construction costs continue to increase. We'll show you some evidence of that in the presentation. As you heard from your architect, and I think from your chief, this phase of design certainly doesn't, lock you into some specific project itself. There will be some flexibility, and we'll present that to you and how that's accomplished. And then I think there's some preliminary funding options that we need to look at, and there's some challenges, as you're aware of, with some outside forces that the city doesn't control that will drive some of that. In terms of service delivery, we believe that the a P3 strategy, as represented by your architect, is appropriate. To Mr. White's comments, it should facilitate a faster development. Hopefully, time is money in that regard. We're going to talk about how that process will allow the city to move quickly, but also take out some risk from the project and hopefully lock in a price. So you'll know exactly what you're going to spend and exactly what the project will cost for the most part for construction. We do think the design build represents the lowest risk exposure to the city. The city is in the business of building buildings, police stations, city halls, et cetera. So you want experts that can do that. And then obviously we want predict a way to pay for it that is not only feasible, but reliable and predictable going forward. And then there is an opportunity to look at beyond the building, in terms of these development strategies or methods of delivery that could include maintenance or even financing. But I think we have a specific recommendation in that regard. Heard a little bit about the background today on the building, so don't focus a lot on the building itself. I think you heard a lot about that today. I think where your eyes are going to fall is to that third bullet. So when we sat down with your finance staff and with your city manager, we went through the city's forecast that's developed by Jennifer. We did see a debt service number assumed, and I think it's a 2027 or 28 number. So it's further out to coincide with when your construction will be completed, but it's $3.5 million. Based on current interest rates, that only generates about $55 million. So that number may sound familiar to a few of you because that was the number you heard 5 years ago for the project cost back then. So we've moved away from that number to more significant cost due to just inflationary concerns. So our goal in working with you is to affirm a budget and develop a funding plan and project delivery method. So I think tonight our focus will be on the budget side of things and project delivery. The funding plan will take some creativity and some input from council as we go forward. I think you have some options, but I believe they might be limited to how you're going to get there ultimately. A little bit about this project, so you're aware of the site, the location. This is just what we took from the prior presentation and staff report. LPAs, you've hired them. They're well-versed in police stations specifically. I believe you were the architect in Rialto. So we did the financing for Rialto just recently. They were probably also in Salinas, my guess, which was another P3 project And I think we most recently worked in Eastvale, on Eastvale's Civic Center project, which they were also the architect. So you've seen all these things that are being designed. I think you asked really good questions. Mayor Laura asked probably the most poignant question, which is what options do we have to build the building to come to fruition under a price that we think we can afford. So what you're going to hear from me today is you got to come up with a number that you're comfortable with ultimately, and they can go design and they can start re-engineering and do that. But how we get there in that process, I want to talk a little bit more about as we go through the presentation. This was the document that we looked at first. I think this was part of the presentation. You've seen it. You have some design costs in here, 5.4 million. We've now got a little bit of an update from your city engineer on costs that are slightly above some of these, but wouldn't worry about too much of that right now. I think where you want to focus in on is some of these updates and where you're at. So these are our estimates. So this is where we start to blend what you've seen and what we're thinking the next steps might be. So you budgeted about $8.4 million for the police station development. That includes land acquisition. You've already spent $3.8 million. You've had miscellaneous costs based on accounting. We've seen about $253,000, and to date, I'm sure there's more, but to date, we saw $52,000 paid to the architect. And again, as your architect pointed out, this is just conceptual design. I think we assumed it was 5%. We think there are still 2 phases of development design left before you can really get to a number or you can get comfortable with your process. Schematic design and design development are really where we're going to point you to next as the next 2 phases. We estimate that to be about $2 million. We think that gets you to about 40% of total design from where you are now, somewhere around that. And then what I think the council is pointing to as the next step to kind of help you get to a number and help you through design, someone coordinates your questions with your architect and with your chief, and that's usually a program manager. We'll call it a construction manager for simplicity purposes, but a program manager will come in and work directly with your architect, work with you and your staff on design, and help develop the packages that are necessary to bid out to the contractors through the design method that we're going to talk about. Interestingly enough, given the timeline that was presented by your architect, when construction dollars need to be out for bidding, I think it was about a little more than 12 months from now. That's kind of what we're assuming too. This process, next phase of process, takes about 12 months. And that would include you engaging a program manager to work with your architect and your staff to help you kind of get to a project that you can, send out to bid, both price and design, working with your architect. Our estimate was 83.5 or 83.8 million, which we like to use the $75 million number we're going to show you because it includes the design and property acquisition, which you've already funded. So that's how we got to 75. I think what you've added is maybe the road, which we didn't have before. So we didn't have that number before. One would argue that maybe that get paid from DIF or other sources other than borrowing or a general fund obligation, but we'll figure that out as we go forward. But that's how we came up with our numbers. So this looks a little bit different than what you've seen from your engineer. I think most of it's in right of way, and there might be some construction costs related to the road. So I think those are the 2 differences from what you see, but most of this is where we came up with our numbers. So 83 less what you've already kind of programmed in your budget gets us to around 75. That was how we kind of backed into it. So cost. These are 2 LPA projects, ironically, that we were asked. We've done this a number of times with different clients that have asked, what has happened? Why are the costs so high? Well, we used 2 different examples. One started in 2018, one in 2024. Then we put in here this building cost estimate index so you can kind of see what happened. We had crazy inflation for the last several years. It's somewhat come down, but one thing to remember about inflation is it comes down. It still resets to the prior number. So the growth you see in 25, for example, is on top of the 24 growth, is on top of the 23 growth, 22 growth. It never goes down below 0 where you have negative inflation. We haven't had that. So if you look at the chart and you look at the cost, you'll kind of see what's in line. It kind of matches. I don't know the square footage of what's proposed but the Rialto project was about $83 million. They financed a big chunk of that, and the rest was cash. And it's currently under construction, but they used a design method similar to what's being proposed today. So this is to help you understand costs. We believe the estimate, based on what we see, is probably a good estimate just based on this. We've done it with other facilities so that you know we've done square footage costs. We've had other police departments under consideration. Oceanside is one of them, population much larger than yours, but their first estimate was 150 million. And they're working it down closer to 100 million is their goal. But they're doing a lot of things to get there, to do that. But these are very expensive buildings, that's for sure. We looked at your finances, so here's where we start to really get into the details. We talked a little bit about, what was put into your forecast document of 3.5 million. We think that's a little short. So 75 million under current interest rates would be about 4.8 million a year for 30 years. So we have a gap of about $19 million. But what's driving, I think, this challenge that you have is not necessarily something, I think, under your control. It's the League of California Cities supporting legislation that would basically share a portion of your sales tax in a pool. That's what's driving a lot of this. I think without that, you would have an easier project to go forward with. So we're looking at that. So that alone creates a structural deficit.
Michael, can you just real quick go back over what the last two sentences?
Yes, I want to be careful how I say it.
Understood.
So there is proposed legislation that was initiated by someone in the Inland Empire, one of the
Is
other
that
cities.
the point of sale stuff?
Yep.
We already know that part.
Yep.
So what I'm asking you is, I think the next
I'm going to get there.
sentence.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So a few years ago, there was some contention in the Inland Empire with one city who suggested that it was to their disadvantage that certain sales tax revenues were no longer part of a pool, what they once were. There was a large sales tax producer that changed the way they reported, and it modified the way those revenues flow to municipalities, either through a pool, then to them directly. There were some winners in that deal, the city of Beaumont being one of them, but there were others. Rialto's one of them, Eastvale's one of them, that all have the same kind of situation that you're involved in. And for the most part, there's an expectation that if this legislation passes, which it seems like it's got good momentum to do so because you have basically 400 plus cities versus the 20 or 30 that are subject to the proposed legislation fighting it. What is being discussed is basically a sharing of the revenue at 50% to the host city and 50% through a pool. It is a ramped up process where once it's put in place, the discussion is that over 5 years, it'll be ramped up starting at some percentage and then ultimately getting to the 50% threshold. The timeline is unknown, but what we are seeing is cities that are impacted, like the city of Beaumont, they are already starting to think through, okay, what do I do? What is my solution to resolving it? So for you, if this legislation never goes forward, you are in the great financial position. If it does go forward, the impact you see on this chart is what you'll have. Now, without the 3.5 million, you're probably pretty solid. If you didn't have a police station project, you would be operating as you are today, healthy, financially secure. But this legislation that's proposed is a threat, not only to your ability to do capital investment, to your ability to even operate and deliver services to your community. That's the real threat. Other communities that are looking at this issue, some have the ability to just budget less. So we have one of the cities, the revenue exceeds their GAN limit, which is the max amount you can collect in taxes, so they just don't budget it. So they can afford some loss. The city of Eastville is all contract city, for example. They don't have a lot of expense. They don't have CalPERS expenses. They don't have all those things. They could probably take a pretty good hit and still function even with their facility. They spend a lot of money in cash in their facility. However, with each city that we're working with, they're looking at options and how to solve it. What do we need to do? So when you have this much of an impact, there's very few options that you have. It's $9 million basically to you, and to some of the other ones, it's about the same amount. They're almost all the same amount, regardless of the population of the city, regardless of the services they provide. The dollar amounts are very similar amongst all the facilities and the impact to the municipality. So we're seeing it pretty much everywhere else. I can tell you what they're doing doesn't mean that's what you should do. I'm not suggesting that, but I do think it's probably one of the few options they have. They're all suggesting that they look at a sales tax measure to back it up. The reason is two things. One, when you lose this much money in one lump sum, there's no other measure that can cover it. You could do a property assessment. It's difficult to implement, challenging to support. Here you have a lot of CFDs. It might be difficult to implement. But for everyone else, that's their contingency plan, that they're going to go forward and do that. Now, it's a what if happens kind of thing for them. When we issued debt, and this started actually with the city of Tracy years ago, they issued debt and they had a lot of concentration of revenue in one specific area. It was the same area that these other cities that are affected have. The rating agency called it out and said, hey, we're worried about this level of concentration. And they looked at it as a concern for them in the rating. That was before the legislation was discussed or even brought about. With Eastvale and Rialto, we had to disclose it. Like, this is a real genuine threat. We could lose this much money. And so the financing for those facilities was built around the actual threat itself. Here, we're not ready to present such a case. As you can see, we showed structural deficits at a smaller debt amount with the loss of the revenue that's proposed. So if we were to go finance this facility, we got to solve a bigger problem. It's not whether or not you can fund a police station, it's how do you provide service and still have capital investment throughout the community. So when I was engaged to assist Elizabeth and Jennifer and the chief in this process, the first thing I point out is, look, this isn't just about one thing, it's about both. We got to figure out how to move the city forward, provide service on a regular basis, and look at how you can do capital investment. The growth potential that the city has will present a number of challenges to you as you go forward. Yesterday, for example, we presented the CFD goals and policies. I guess I could say this. I mean, one of them is going to be, how do we look at the CFD as it relates to services, and how do we get people to pay for public safety operational costs for new development? That won't cover all the costs, right? It won't cover the capital costs. So we're going to talk about a police station today, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're not talking about a fire station down the road for that extra growth. It's going to happen. It's going to come. Your diff fees maybe will cover some of it, but maybe not all of it. So each fire station costs $10 to $15 million just for a basic station, and it's $2+ million to staff it. So each one of those, we got to figure out, okay, how do we solve this build-out problem? So our goal in working with you is to figure out, okay, how do we look long-term beyond this? This is obviously the first thing that's come up. It's been a need that's been around for a while, but how do we communicate that out? I think this also should work in concert with some of the other consultants you've brought in, hopefully, to communicate that and review things. The grassroots group is what I'm referring to there. They'll be part of this discussion, I think. So here's my idea, what you're planning. Your funding plan should assume, one, that there will be a revenue loss. It's not your control, unfortunately. I think you could fight. I'm not convinced about the number, 50%. I'm not convinced about the ramp up. I don't know exactly how that fight should look, but I've encouraged the clients that we have to try and work together to make the strongest argument they can about impact. Some cities have contractual obligations with the funds that make it really interesting to see what they can do to take them. You're not there at that point yet, but I think there's some room there, and I'm not exactly sure how much that will get you, but I think it's worth whatever fight you're willing to give them to save this money that your constituents and residents will lose. We agree with the staff's estimate. We haven't, looked at this one. The one was just handed out today, but it makes sense if there's another project there. Our plan would be to come back and look at a combination of funds, whether it's DIF funds or other restricted funds, to bring the project to fruition. Our number, at least for right now, is $75 million. We feel comfortable with that number. We haven't sat down with your police chief or architect and say, okay, what does that exactly mean if it's 75? We don't think, unfortunately, it's 50, where you were 5 or 6 years ago. We think we've definitely moved away from that. And we do think the alternative financing options will assist you and bringing the project to fruition regardless of your budget. So the funding plan must assume, in our mind, a schematic design and design development. You need all that before you do any financing. Your architect mentioned that he's at 3%. We think this brings you closer to 40% or somewhere around that. At that point, to Mr. White's comments about budget, the goal then is to go out and get a guaranteed maximum price for construction. So you'll bid it out asking for that, and that takes construction risk out. You'll still have some contingency, but you'll get a lot more comfortable. The reason we do that is when we go to finance, we want to be able to tell the investors, here's how much the GMP is. We're not borrowing too much, we're not borrowing too little, and it allows us to do that. We need to close the operational capital funding gap. We certainly don't want to go to the capital markets knowing that it's there. We don't think that's prudent, but secondly, we don't think it's just generally a good advice to go forward that way. Our funding plan must look at service delivery. As your chief pointed out, this is a capital cost. It's a one-time cost for the station, but you have staffing that's going to grow into the station. So we need to look out at the staffing cost to make sure what you're building you can afford to staff as well. So we're going to look at that. Then obviously we need to preserve credit quality. The city's got high credit. You're positioned very well financially. You've done all the right things for many years now. We certainly don't want to put that at risk. We want to preserve it. The better the credit, the lower the borrowing cost. There's a relationship there. And we want to look at revenue enhancements that are dedicated streams to stabilize things in the long run. That, again, limits, I think, what they are. We don't think there are very many external funding options for grants. But, you know, let's say, for example, you're suggesting there's an EOC here, or maybe there's some solar stuff. I mean, those are the kind of things we could look at or try to. We think we should at least attempt to. I think it's just a good practice if you're going to go out to the public and ask for some assistance somewhere, that we exhaust everything, turn over every rock, every stone, and say, look, we're trying to do all these things. And I think that goes the same for somewhat of a cost containment exercise that I think the council already kind of started tonight with some questions on making sure that this is affordable and that all the options have been displayed. And it could be possible, not speaking for your architect or your engineer, but I think there's elements, because you have these outside buildings, I think there's elements to do bid options where you say, look, I want to build, give me a bid for the building and give me a second bid as an option to do these outside buildings. Then you can see what the bids come back and see what you can afford. The bidding recently in Eastville, as your architect knows, came out very good. It was very favorable to them. They were really worried about where the bids were going to come in. They actually came in at where we wanted them to, in some cases better. So the bid environment is good currently. Where it is, you know, in early 2027, I can't tell you, but for right now, things look okay. So I'm going to go into project delivery, but I can answer any questions you have before I do that if you want.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. Councilmember White?
Before I ask my questions, what is project delivery going to cover? Are we done with the finance discussion at this point, or is project delivery part of that?
I think it will do most of it. We're mostly done with the funding. So what's next is just risk mitigation, Councilmember Lloyd. So
Okay.
whatever, if you want to ask about funding plans or some considerations, now would probably be the time to do it.
Okay. This first question is not a serious question, but will the pool cover future infrastructure costs for those of us who have put out these investments? I doubt it. So the elephant in the room is the sales tax.
Yeah.
And if we do decide to go to the ballot for sales tax, what's the timing? Will we be looking at 26, 28,
November.
or something else?
November of 26.
So if this is on the same ballot as the RCTC 1% sales tax increase countywide, and we're asking our constituents to vote for both, if this fails, then what?
Well, so you have a good question, but I think there's two parts to that.
Okay.
The first is you're competing for sales tax, right? So if they have a measure, that takes away some capacity for you to add to yours.
No, I don't think so, because I think RCTC got a special
They got legislation to go above.
they got legislation that allowed them to go up 1% over what the original.
Over the statutory rate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that may help, but I do think you know the If you fail, then the project doesn't move forward, obviously. This project specifically probably would not move forward.
And this sales tax measure that we would be considering would not be specific just to build the police station. It would be general revenue going forward?
Yes, you have a structural challenge too with the loss of the revenue. So it would be basically a general issue, majority vote type stuff. I think long-term, as we've talked about with just general property tax growth and the annexation agreements and all those things, the growth of the city is going to need some revenue, certainly, to build out to its full potential. I would like to believe that all your revenue beyond that is stable. But for some of these facilities, they are leased facilities. So these point-of-sale firms can go away.
Could go to something different.
Yes. So the need to continue to look for development opportunities is very important going forward, as we talked about with some of the other proposed developments. You'll need a balance of new revenue and possibly revenue measure.
So if I was a non-council member, just a regular citizen, and I don't know all the things that you're telling me, and I'm looking at a sales tax that's going to improve traffic infrastructure versus a sales tax that's going to give the city more money to spend, it's a slam dunk for me. I'm not going to vote for both. And so that's my concern with doing it in 2026. Another question I have, and I think you sort of, first of all, what did you mean by some cities have contractual money locked up?
They've issued debt on the revenue stream.
Say again?
They've issued debt, or they have labor agreements that tie up revenue prior to the implementation or even discussion of the proposed legislation.
But that, to me, sounds like you'd be in a negative, not in a good position, whereas if you didn't have that, but it seemed to me you were saying that those cities might
If I
benefit
were
by that?
one of, to your question, if I were one of those cities, I would definitely have a much stronger argument of the impact. Most of the cities, I shouldn't say most, there are several cities that have surplus budgetary revenues that are pretty substantial from it, and there are some that do not. Tracy being one of them. Some other ones have basically obligated all their general fund, that taking of 50% is very, very harmful to them.
And I'm assuming that the ramping up would start where we would, when you say at the end of 5 years, we'd be at 50%, but we would have come down to 50%, right? So 100% now, 75% next year, that's what you meant by ramping?
Yeah.
Okay.
Their proposals to take it in tranches. But I think one thing to consider, going back a question and then also adding into your current question, I think an educational campaign is critical to whenever you go forward, right? And that's why I think why you have grassroots going here. The other two is, let's say you do go forward in 26 and it passes, and this legislation is implemented a year or two later. For a short period of time, you're going to have a sales tax measure revenue and this other revenue source. You're going to build up quite a big fund where you can fund capital without actually having to borrow money potentially. I mean, that's how Eastville built their civic center, basically was cash. That's how Rialto built a big part of their police station too. They put 25, 30 million in cash.
And the mayor brought up the issue with the firing range, possibly going to a different, and you brought up the issue with getting a different bid for the buildings as well as the outbuildings. Is there a way to phase in the building? In other words, build something now and worry about building another piece of it 10 years from now and look at it in that way?
I think there's probably, I'm not the expert in this area, but my guess is that you could probably do some components of those outbuildings that are, the range being probably one of them. Sure, the chief knows this, and I know the architect does. Usually the first thing people bring up is the range. Every police station, that's the first thing that they talk about.
Well,
Do we need
don't
it?
get me wrong, I think the range
Yeah.
is important.
I
think
understand, but it's usually the first thing that comes up, no matter what. And so
First thing that comes up that they want or that they're willing to give up?
They'll cut, yeah.
They'll cut, okay. Are there other ideas such as a public safety district, other kinds of funding mechanisms besides a sales tax that we could consider?
There's only, I can think of three mechanisms, but before I get into those three, you do have a services CFD for public safety now that funds operations.
On some homes.
On new developments.
On new
Probably a
development.
standard condition now
Right.
for new stuff, right? So there's three. Two you're probably not going to like. And I'll start with those two. One is, if you look at like Altadena Library District, they did a district-wide CFD to build a library. So you could do a citywide CFD for a police station. Don't think you're going to like that one. The other is a parcel tax, for the same reason you probably wouldn't like the CFD. Basically puts a value. The third, besides a sales tax measure, is a general obligation bond, which is, again, an assessment on property. All three of those would be paid for directly by the individuals that own property or the people that are renting, and it gets passed through. The sales tax measure is the only one where someone like me or Brandon that are here having lunch or shopping, we're going to pay. We don't live here, but the city gets the benefit of traffic. And as you start to build your economic program in, and you got large shopping center projects, those are going to bring people from other communities that are going to contribute to that. So some of your funding through a sales tax measure will be funded from people from the outside.
So, and I'm going to do what you just did and bring up something that no one's going to want to hear about. But, the idea of the fact that people coming in are going to pay the sales tax. If you were to look at something that generates revenues that cities are doing that we, as a council, have decided we didn't want to entertain, was cannabis.
Yeah.
So if you have cannabis, the difference between that and a sales tax revenue is a sales tax, if I don't buy cannabis, doesn't cost me anything. There's no additional cost for me. If we have a sales tax, that's 1% probably. Is that what we're thinking? 1%, 1.5%?
We didn't look at a percent yet. That would be developed as part of the funding plan.
Say again, please?
We didn't look at the number yet.
Okay.
We didn't got that far yet.
But that's going to impact everyone for the entire year.
Yep.
And the other idea, the other one you brought up was like parcel tax or something that's based on property ownership.
Yep.
Again, that is something that not everyone, some people will have control over not having to spend that extra 1% or 2%.
Well, I can speak to the cannabis specifically because I just did a cannabis program for city of Covina, and I've worked with other Coachella Valley cities on it. It is extremely volatile right now. In fact, the revenues have dropped quite a bit everywhere. Some of so having gone through that process in Covina, and not to steer this meeting away from it, that city made a decision to have only two cultivation or distribution facilities. They're a smaller population than you are. But we did RFPs basically for these centers. We interviewed everybody. Night and day difference when you actually talk to people versus when you just let anybody come in. We can actually see who actually knew what they were doing versus some that didn't. But I don't think it's going to generate anywhere near the revenue that you want. The city of Santa Ana has got dozens of cannabis operations in their city, and I think the best year it generated $6 million.
And I really didn't bring it up on the idea of let's do cannabis because I see what's happening in our neighbors.
Yeah.
I brought it up with the idea is if there's a cost that we don't have to make everyone pay.
Yeah, so to your point, I think what we're asking for tonight, after we go through delivery methods, is to allow us to work with staff to come up with all the options and present them to you. So it'll be everything. It'll be CFDs, parcel tax, general obligation bond. We'll lay them all out and what we think the value is and whether or not we'll put a matrix together that basically will look at what is from a high, medium to low perspective, what is the hardest to implement and what is the easiest to implement, and then what is the reward. So what we want is low impact to your residents, high revenue to the city. So we're going to look at each one from that evaluation. Okay, what's the likelihood of them passing? So voter food initiative, challenging, all of them, regardless they are. But we'll look at what the value is to each one.
And would you look at what a sales tax dedicated to the police department or to public safety
Yeah,
specifically?
they would require three-quarters vote. Yeah, we could do that.
Understood.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll look at it from 25 basis points, 50 to a whole cent.
Okay.
Hold on, could you say that again?
We're going to look at each option in the sales tax. So some cities adopt, it'd be, quarter of a cent, half cent, or full 1 cent. There are some cities that actually will ask for a cent and then 10 years in, lower it to 3/4 of a cent because they anticipate development coming in to pick up that difference.
Well, and that's my question. If we had a sales tax that was specific to build the police department, that means we can dedicate that funding for that purpose. It could also have a sunset.
You could. So the sunset, you'd want the sunset to tie to the debt term,
Yes,
right?
yes. I'm just, all I'm looking at is when
Yeah.
when I'm
Yeah.
competing the two
Yeah.
sales tax
Yep.
measures, which way am I gonna go?
So what usually happens with all these measures, we'll give you what we think the options are and what we think the impact is. It's been our experience that some polling consultant that you hire will start asking people, how do you feel about this? Would you pay for this? And they'll come back to you and say, hey, we've talked to 300 voters, potential voters, and here's what they like, here's what they don't like. And it narrows down the options because you want the one that has the highest likelihood of success. And so we'll make sure that we give them a robust number of options to have those conversations because I think you're going to need that to decide how to go forward.
And my last question until the second round comes, is we were told on RCTC that the commission could not spend any money to promote the sales
That's
tax
correct.
measure. Are
Only-
we in the same place?
Yes, you can
So how-
only do educational campaigns. So part of the work that we're doing on the impact of this loss, that's going to be a big part of your educational campaign that you're going to hire some consultant to go out and do your campaign with, and they're going to use that.
Okay.
So
Thank
this is a lot more than about the police station in my mind. This is about how are we going to solve all these other issues and what are the options to do it?
Yeah.
And it's under an educational component. We're not, we may come up with a recommendation, but our recommendation will be based on what we think is the easiest to accomplish and produce the best result. So some of the options are going to be limited because they just won't cover what you need. And some of them will be pretty robust. My assumption going forward, and we can run the scenarios, but we've had some clients decide, I'm going to go for the max amount I can. And the purpose of that is so that they don't have to ask again. We had one client that had $40 million in reserve. They went out for 1 cent just because they knew we're going to run out of this money in 15 years. So why don't we do what we can now? And when you look at capital investment for cities that have been around a long time, most of the time the CIP documents reference what's available. But if you really looked at every roof, every park, street that needs to be done, you need a lot more money than probably what it can even generate. So some of them look at a perspective of, okay, what really has to happen to really accomplish what we need, not what we think we're going to need. We've had some that have sunsets. City of Santa Ana not only has a sunset, but has a reduction. It's challenging for them to get back to where they need to go because revenues have dropped.
And I'm sorry, I said it was my last question, but can you just explain? I thought I saw public-private partnership in the suggestions or in the
We're getting, that's the
agenda.
next
it. Okay.
phase of the presentation.
Thank you.
No need to apologize, but just remember. The concern I have with Sunset is as you look down at paying off the police station in this case, your staffing costs continue to rise, and so you still have to keep.
And you're going to have to rebuild City Hall.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Remember, these buildings are 30 to 50 years, and it's got to be a ability to finance them. So, part of your campaign, I think you're honestly going to have to look at a long-term capital plan and an operational plan. We would probably suggest that you forecast out 20 years. It'll be a guess after probably 5 years, really. You can't really look that far out, but in that 20-year forecast, you should have some good idea of your capital needs.
And I think the smart
growth.
thing, too, at this point, is the police station is a build-out, so it's.
That's right. So your other buildings will need that too. Right.
Councilmember Finn?
Yes, if a decision of a sales tax measure was to be made, or was made, does it have to be at a general election? Can it be in a primary? I don't think we want to spend the money for a special election.
I think it has to be during a general election.
Okay, and then if it is for if decision is for 26, do you know the cutoff with the
August.
county?
August. of the following year, so August of '26, to get to the November election.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I know it's not intentional, but the timing of everything kind of works pretty good with your design and some of these other decisions you have to make. It's just happening to fall in line. Now, whether it's successful, that will be the challenge.
See no further questions. Continue on, oh.
All right.
Cloud of doom.
That was the worst part. This part I think is easy, as long as I
thank
get
you.
it right. If
Appreciate
not,
that.
he's gonna jump me back here and correct me. So here's are the different methods that I think are being presented as options, and we're gonna kind of limit these. There are basically 5.
Can we get his screen up again?
You got it? All right. So here are basically the 5. We don't think you need to worry about all 5. When we went through this exercise, the question that I asked myself after meeting with your staff is, okay, we can eliminate probably one of these, focus maybe on 1 or 2 of them, but honestly, it's the funding plan that decides how comfortable you are really with anything. We don't recommend the design bid build, takes longer and puts a lot of risk. This council doesn't want risk for construction or any other risk. I think your architect recommended the design build, and another version of that is progressive design build. Those are the 2 we think are a best fit for you. We don't think design build finance is necessary. What all that does basically is whoever builds your building actually does the financing and charges you a lease payment. They charge a premium to do the financing. You have strong credit. If you have a revenue stream in place, you're better off doing it yourself. It'll save you money. So we're not gonna recommend that option here. And there's another one that's not here, but basically it's design, build, finance, and operate where they maintain the facility for you. It's very expensive. So larger P3s like Long Beach, their big P3 project, I think they did it that way. So be maintained. Timeline. So I think this is an important slide for a couple reasons. Councilmember White asked about the timeline. So these are kind of a breakdown. I think we used this for a presentation in Menifee. I actually think LPA was part of some of this discussion that we had as a workshop generally. So to Councilmember White's question, design bill you see there in the middle does speed things up. We think if you can see the overlay, what I want you to focus on is the overlay of design and financing. And there's another chart in here that'll explain that in a little more detail. To get to a point where you can get confident in what the building's gonna cost, you'll need to finish about 40% of the design work. Not where you are today. That's why you're asking about numbers and they're giving you a lot of contingencies. I think you'll get more comfortable with that. You'll need to bring in a project or a project manager, or a program manager that works with your architect and your staff that basically manages the P3 process. They'll go out and they'll do all the bidding for you with the contractors. They'll work with you on design so you don't lose design control. And there are off-ramps in the process if you choose to change. We don't recommend you do that. Eastvale did that, delayed their project a little bit. But we think one of these processes is best for you. We believe the design build or progressive design build is probably those for time reasons and the ability to do financing. You don't have a lot of cash to fund anything really beyond probably the 40% and to get further in. It would require more money out of reserves to do that. So we think these 2 options put you at a position where we think what you've already kind of programmed, that $8 million, will probably get you all the way to that point or very, very close to it with the program manager and your architect. So if you have a measure that goes out and it's successful, you'll be ready you'll have revenue coming in. You won't issue debt until after that. So when your architect reference, hey, we go out to bid and we have bids in like March, that would work pretty good for us because we'll have a measure that would pass in November potentially, and then we'll know. The revenue will start flowing. Let's say if you passed a measure in November, I think by summertime, it takes 2 quarters to collect your first tranche of revenue from those sales tax measure out. So you would get 1 full quarter during that current fiscal year. And then the year after that, when debt service is due, you'd have the whole year. In 26, assuming one would pass, remember, you're still going to have your whole sales tax because nothing's been implemented, plus you're going to collect money. So there'll be money to do multiple things. So if you have other capital needs, you would cash fund them. You wouldn't need to borrow money potentially. But we think this is the right mechanism to look at this because I think it speeds up your project, gives you the risk controls that you need, and I think blends well with where we think your financial plan's going to go and currently where you are with your project. So here's a little bit more in the details about the timeline of project delivery. These are general. It's not specific to your project. We've not sat down with your architect and said, hey, do you think this timeline of delivery is accurate? You've already started some of the process, so some of these months can be probably shaved off. But if you look at the design build and the progressive design build, I think what most councils and staff want is you want to avoid exposure to risk. And so you get that here, but you also want some involvement in pre-development and control. And you still get that with these two mechanisms. And I think that's something that most cities that I've worked with said, hey, we don't want to lose control. Once we give it to the program manager and the architect, we want to be able to have input like you did today. Like, hey, what about this? What about that? Most of the projects that we've worked on, as they go through further into the design, there'll be a lot more feedback that you'll have and you'll want to fine tune it. So let's say hypothetically, you decide 75 million is a number you're comfortable with. Well, he knows 75 million. Your chief knows, okay, I got 75 million. They design the best they can for $75 million, whatever that is. And then they come up with bids, and so the bids can assume that. Now, if you want to go higher than that, I think if you were to pass a revenue measure like we're talking about, you could probably spend much more than that. You'll have the capacity to. Doesn't mean you want to, but you'll have the capacity to do it. I will say this was my concern about sitting next to the chief. You got to come up with a number. You have to. They have to have some budget to work from. It may not be this budget. It may be this budget. But the program manager and the architect probably need a number.
When?
No.
Tonight?
Whenever you decide to move forward, there should be a budget in place. We can afford to fund a $70 million project, an 80, whatever that number is. And then the approach to design becomes about how we design to that budget and we deliver a project on that budget. So it's not, but we need a target. Right now, we have programmed and designed what we heard from the department, what's needed. But what's needed might not be what you can afford. So we need to know what we can afford to design to that.
But we would need to know whether we're going for a half cent or a full cent. So you're not going to tell us that tonight because we don't know where we need to be on that, right?
No, your polling will tell you what your public will support. So there's kind of two things. What I will say, and I'll let the architect speak to this point. I think you've got enough time to continue with some more design work, schematic design or program development design or design development, which won't commit you, I think, to anything, but it will allow you to look at your options and to probably fine tune the cost a little bit more. You've got it budgeted. You've already set the money aside to do it, to go that far. What you probably would want to do is engage a program manager to help you work with your architect and your staff to figure out, okay, is there anything we can do? Every one of these projects goes through some element of value engineering. They all do at some point, where someone will come in and go, okay, this is the architect's estimate at 75 million. Someone's going to look through and go, all right, here's why I think it is or isn't 75 million. That's somebody outside that comes in somewhat independently that can do that on your behalf. So I think that's a process. You don't have to commit to a specific revenue source yet to continue with, because I think you're going to need it for the polling purpose.
Can you give us a timeline of when you need us to tell you what that number is? Assuming you were able to put together?
What do you need to finish to design development? 8 months? 6 to 8 months?
It's 7 months.
Yeah, 7 months from now, probably. So
Wait a second.
you're out probably March. You probably have something in March,
but
but
wait a
we're
second.
going to give you a funding plan in the next 45 days, I hope.
That's what I meant. I mean, you can't wait till 7 months to get the $75 million.
No, he's going to give you a stronger number
Okay.
with further design work, but we're going to give you a funding plan as soon as we can.
Okay.
I mean, that's not just for this, that's just in general. We think you've got to act.
Okay.
But you're saying to get a project manager to help us hone down cost in the meantime. Do I understand that correctly?
Program managers typically work with your architect as you go through the design build process. They're the ones that actually implement the P3.
And
He
will they look-
designs to it, but they actually do all the implementation of the program.
And they'll look at different building options as far as maybe
Oh, yeah.
prefab versus build on site and things like that. Is that?
It's very common for them to
Okay.
work in partnership to do that. And again, that's based on some budget. So for now, if the council is comfortable with what's being presented, they could design to that. Doesn't mean you're committed to it. And they could further refine and say, yeah, we're either, that number's good, or we think the number's higher as they start doing more work. The goal, obviously, I think with everyone is to bring a project, the lowest cost we possibly can. And I think the question you asked about materials and glass and buildings, I mean, I think that all takes into consideration.
Mayor Pro Tem Boyd?
Well, let me,
Okay.
I wanna
Well,
hear your decision.
To reemphasize the tracking of the cost, we did a cost estimate at conceptual design. Whether it's our cost estimator or the program manager doing cost estimate, we would update that cost estimate at regular intervals. So if schematic design phase is 3 months, at the end of 3 months, we're going to give you an update. This is what we've designed. This is what we anticipate the cost to be. This is what we anticipate the schedule to be. Do you want us to keep going? And then we can do that again at regular intervals. I've seen 50% DD, more common is 100% of design development, and we give you another update. But at whatever interval you dictate, we can report back to you the status of the project.
Tim Boyd?
Yeah, Mr. Bush, when you come back in, let's say, 45 days, and you're looking at the projection, I mean, are you looking at saying, hey, if we have a budget of 60 million, if we have a budget of 65 million, if we have a budget of 70 or 75 million, I mean, are you going to come back with numbers along those lines? Or every 10 million, you can expect this to increase? I mean, I think that would help to identify those numbers. If we give direction for him to continue to 40%, obviously that'll help us. But if we can't get there between now and the 45-day timeframe you have.
Yeah, let me, in my head, I visualize a chart, kind of like the one on your screen now, that looks at all the options and would present how much you could afford based on the option. Whether,
Within the next 45 days.
I'm going to try. I
Okay,
think we've done enough of these reports candidly where I'm just going to go to one of the templates because the measures don't really change.
right.
It's just, what do they mean to you specifically? So we'll have to look at assess property values here, but there's only 5 or 6 different options that you have. We just got to look at what each one does. HDL will provide us the sales tax information. If we ask for an estimate, they'll do it. You know, then it's just a matter of looking at some of the other options that are maybe more challenging, that are more property specific related. And we may throw some in, cannabis or something else, but those are difficult to really come up with a number.
And then do you anticipate within your estimates that you're projecting forward that you are also looking at other infrastructure projects, the needs that are being determined currently with a Parks Master Plan, looking at community centers, looking at additional public safety within that as well to say, hey, if these come within the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think in an ideal world, and this is not to say anything about your staff and the work they do, but when we're asked to do this type of exercise, we typically do our own forecast. We have a 20-year forecast or a 10-year forecast that has these kind of toggles inside of it that we can say, okay, on and off certain kind of projects where we can fully implement things that even aren't in your budget that may be planned out. Doesn't mean that Jennifer can't do it with her model. But the way we look at it is we will sit here with your staff and the council and they'll say, what about this? What about this? And so it has like basically a desktop where it has all these charts in it that as you change, the lines move and show you, okay, what happens with these different options and these different expenditure plans. Maybe something we can implement with the model that Jennifer has. But we could. I don't know if we can do that in 45 days, but I think your polling will probably give you a lot of information on what you'll have to fund. So as part of your educational campaign, there's going to be some highlights that you're going to want to say, we're going to fund X, Y, Z, and it's going to be something your public wants.
That's essentially what I'm alluding
Right,
to.
exactly. So I think that's what's going to happen is, okay, here's our basic essential service delivery needs. We need to continue to provide service. In addition to that, we have certain capital needs that the community wants or that we need. And in the polling questions will ask, would you support this measure at this amount if the city did this, this, and this. So there's a lot of those questions that go out as part of it. And so the amount of a specific measure may resonate on what the public is willing to support generally.
If I can just add, so Grassroots has done some of the pre-work to looking at the different options for revenues and things like that, and we can share that with Mike Bush so that he has that, it'll kind of maybe move the process a little faster. Also, too, just to let everyone, the council know that Grassroots will be starting working with their polling consultant in September. So that'll start working, they'll be meeting with staff, designing questions. We'll probably pull UFI in to kind of ask them to what kind of questions they would like to include in there. And so that's going to be kind of moving along simultaneously.
Thank you. And my next question is for Mr. Hart. How far can you get us in 45 days?
I'm going to interject. Unfortunately, Mr. Hart's contract is completed with tonight. The city will have to go out to bid for those services. Although LPA is a very competitive firm, it'll have to be formally bid.
Which is over a 45-day process. Thank you.
Councilor Martinez?
I just want to follow up, Mr. Bush. So when you come back with these 45 days with this, with the options, the public surveying should be done by that time as well, so we have the whole package. Is that the idea?
The polling, the surveying, it'll
Yeah.
be probably completed in January is what we're looking at.
Anyway, September, October, November. So we might be looking at, here are some options, here's what sales tax would do, here's what that would do. And you're going to want a number for us to say, okay, we're going to go with 80, 70, whatever it is, because we think we can generate this, but we really won't know what the public's willing to go for until
Correct.
afterwards.
So
That's my concern.
It's not really all that relevant, exactly, Councilmember. So you can pick 70 million or 100 million. And it really, what the public will support will guide it. So tonight, I think what your architect presented to you is reasonable. We'll kind of use that as the basis for what we're going to do. And ultimately, it will be what revenue generators are out there and what the public's willing to support, which will guide it. Doesn't mean that you have to be comfortable with the number ultimately, but for our exercise, I think we're going to use 75 million.
That clarifies.
I think the other thing I'd like to do, in addition to the funding plan, is I'll work with the architect and your staff, and I think we should probably give you a timeline of events all the way through to where they talked about bidding out. I think we can work through that with them. And that would include bidding out services.
Councilmember Finn?
Yes, so in reference to the polling, if you come back in 45 days and say, hey, 1% get you this and so forth, do we formulate those polling questions based on what council is direction we're kind of heading to see if the public bites on that? Is that?
It'll be one
is
of
it-
many. It'll be one of many. So you may have a recommendation or you may have a preference, but ultimately let the polling do the work
Gotcha, okay.
for you. Like you may say, okay, because honestly, I think some are going to be really challenging, given that you have a robust CFD program, for example.
We're gonna, so
But-
when the polling, there'll be
They'll
multiple
be asking,
scenarios
yeah.
offered then,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay.
They have to do that just to ensure, okay, where's the comfort level?
So it's not just a one question, yes or no thing?
No, there'll be
Yeah.
10, 15, 20 questions
Wow,
typically
okay.
in one of those polls.
All right, thank you.
But I would spend some time thinking about your priorities on what you would fund and what you think the public wants, because that'll be really important to polling, beyond the conversation we're having immediately here with the police station. So there may be a need for park improvements, or, remember, this is, what we're searching here for isn't just capital dollars potentially, it's operating dollars. So if there's some operating program that's underfunded that the public's been asking for a long time, that may be something you want to put in the polling. And that'll determine the rate. The more the public will support, usually the revenue measure will match what they're willing to support.
We're good to move on?
That's it. This is what we just talked about, was this comprehensive approach. You guys see it? No. So I'll read it off while you're waiting for that to join. So we're using 75 million. We're looking at your of
We
debt
can,
service.
we can see it now.
Okay, we're looking at a debt service assumption of 4.8 million. Hey, if they lower rates and things move, we'll be updating that on a regular basis too. We're looking at the proposed legislation, which would impact your general fund, and trying to solve that. We'll be looking at funding alternatives, which we've already kind of briefly talked about. We're going to look at the funding plan holistically, not just for this project, but for your operations and other capital investments that the council may want, and I'll be working with your staff to determine, what those might be. We'll be talking a little bit more, I think, about the delivery model, and I think we're going to have to do that in light of where you are with your current architect and the next steps forward, because this is where you make that decision on a program manager, I think, at the same time. So I want to sit down with LPA and have that conversation when they meet with their staff. It's, in my mind, I'm thinking you bring them both in at the same time. Now is probably the time to do it. I don't know if it's one RFP or two, but I'll sit down with them and I'll give your staff my feedback on that. We know that the council, by their very nature of how they look out for the best interest of the public, is to avoid construction and fiscal risks. So the GMP and the process of design build does that. We want to limit, obviously, development costs, and we want to provide some certainty for debt if we go down that route. So those are all the things we're going to try and accomplish that are going to be taken into consideration as we work forward. So my goal is, before we break for any kind of holiday, to be back in front of you. Give you something to think about at Thanksgiving. You can. Happy to host you.
Yeah.
Happy to host you guys. Come on down.
Do you need anything from us at this
I
point?
think we need to approve the plan,
Go
right?
approve the preliminary and
We need clear direction on the conceptual plan.
so I would like to suggest, at least from what I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, that we approve the preliminary, but we also go out for a project manager to help look at analyze the building to tighten the costs. Is that?
I agree.
Yeah, okay. So we approve the concept, go out to project manager to help us tighten costs on this. And see what we, go ahead.
And we probably need a portion of design approved.
Yeah, Mayor, I think what you're seeking is authorizing staff to develop the package to go out and look for a program manager in the next phase of design. That's how you're going to refine the cost.
Okay. Good? Good, would you?
Did you, Mayor, did we see if anybody had any on the phone?
I don't have any written comments. Benny, do we have any callers on the line?
No callers.
So with that, I'll adjourn the meeting at 7:10.
Thank you.
You good?